Leader McConnell, were you ever briefed before this week about this Russian bounty intelligence, and what did you make of it?
Well, at the risk of echoing my colleagues, the briefings that are being offered are appropriate. Everybody who wants to get a briefing is able to do it. I recommend we do it committee by committee if we choose to. I don't have an observation about what may have happened in the past, but listen to the people who have been briefed, and it appears as if this is not a conclusion that's been reached to such a level that it might have even made it to the top.
Do you think Russia should be allowed back into the G7?
Majority Leader,
Do you think Russia should be allowed back into the G7?
Absolutely not.
No.
Majority Leader,
Is there any reason that you believe that the president should have been briefed on this intelligence? And do you have any knowledge of whether or not this information was included in his briefing materials?
Look, I don't have an observation to make about that. What you've heard our colleagues say is conclusions apparently were not reached in this matter, and I can't imagine whether the president is subjected to every rumor that may be unsubstantiated. I really don't know what happens in these presidential daily briefings.
Have you been briefed?
Mr. Leader, you had Mr. Luntz in lunch today. My question for you, do you think that the president's handling of the coronavirus pandemic has A, hurt Americans, but B, hurt your own political prognosis?
Well, what I can tell you is what Senate Republicans did was respond to the crisis by beginning to write the CARES Act in my office, which ultimately became law without a single dissent, which has done a great deal to prop up the economy. And as you've heard suggested, I said back in March, we'd take another look at this, probably in July, take a snapshot of where we are, both on the health front and on the economic recovery front, and decide at that point exactly what needs to be done further. What I can tell you without fear of contradiction is the focus will be kids, jobs, and health care. What I can tell you without fear of contradiction is any bill that passes the Senate will have liability protections in it. And without picking any of you out, you've been mischaracterizing what this is about. It's not just for businesses. This is liability protection for everyone. Hospitals, doctors, nurses, businesses, colleges, universities, K through 12 educators, everybody who interacted with this pandemic about which we knew nothing before it hit. Unless you're grossly negligent or intentionally engaged in misconduct, we're going to see to it that you don't get sued on top of everything else you've had to deal with in trying to get through this. So that's a prediction I can make about a bill that we'll make a final decision on in July when we get back. I think it is exactly the right time to address this issue.
Senator McConnell, do you support Congress taking any action against Russia, any sanctions legislation or anything like that?
Look, it's no secret the Russians are up to no good. They have been throughout Putin's tenure. Various administrations have tried to warm up to Putin. It's clear that he's not somebody you can warm up to. I can't verify the current rumors that all of you are writing about, but would I be surprised if the Russians were doing something like this? Absolutely not. They are trying to create a problem for us everywhere. They particularly want us out of Syria and out of Afghanistan. So it shouldn't be a surprise to anyone that they're going to try to create as many problems as they can for our continued presence in the Middle East, or for that matter, anywhere else in the world that they can stick their thumb in our eyes. Yeah.
Do you expect a bill before August? Do you expect a bill to pass before August, a COVID relief bill?
Yeah, we're going to stay on the schedule that I announced earlier in the year. which means we will not be here in August. So I think the time to focus on this, as I said 3 months ago, and as others have said today, is that period in July, which also I think dovetails nicely with the perfect time to take an assessment of the economy and the progress we're making on the healthcare front, and see if there's additional assistance needed for healthcare providers, see if there's additional incentive needed for the rapid effort to develop, as Senator Blunt pointed out, make sure we have enough testing. Is the treatment are the treatment options improving? How much more, if anything, do we need to do on the vaccine front? Because we all know the only way we ever put this in the rearview mirror is with a vaccine. In the meantime, what we're all trying to demonstrate for everybody in the country is the single most important thing you can do, not only to protect yourself, but protect others until we get a vaccine: put on the mask. It's not complicated.
Senator, can I ask you, some Democratic senators are already discussing getting rid of the legislative filibuster if they win the Senate. What is your response to that? And also, if you keep the majority, will you consider getting rid of the legislative filibuster?
Well, I consistently said no to the current president on that issue, and he tweeted about me a number of times, which I greatly appreciated. And let me say, I think the important thing for our Democratic friends to remember is that you may not be in total control in the future. And anytime you start fiddling around with the rules of the Senate, I think you always need to put yourself in the other fellow's shoes and just imagine what might happen when the winds shift. With regard to the changes that have occurred on the executive calendar, really that's a very recent phenomenon. Even though it was possible on the executive calendar to filibuster nominees, it just wasn't done until Bush 43 got elected. And ironically, the current Democratic leader of the Senate was the ringleader in starting to filibuster on the executive calendar. And then Senator Reid undid that. And where we are today on the executive calendar is right back where we were for 200 years prior to Bush 43. So that's not really a revolution. What would be a revolution is to turn the Senate into the House, would be to change the legislative filibuster.
Leader McConnell?
I'm not through. So do I feel strongly about it? You bet. And if there are any responsible Democratic senators left who aren't going to be stampeded by the hard left, they ought to take a pause and think about whether they really think it's a good idea for the country to put the one institution that guaranteed that America stayed in the middle of the road into the same place as the House. I'm going to take one more. Somebody was trying to speak up. Yeah.
On the COVID package, I'm curious what you expect the unemployment benefit provisions to look like after the 600 expire in July, and are you open to another round of direct payments?
It's a good question. Yeah. Unemployment is extremely important, and we need to make sure for those who are not able to recover their jobs, unemployment is adequate. That is a different issue from whether we ought to pay people a bonus not to go back to work. So I think that was a mistake, and we're hearing it all over the country that it's made it harder actually to get people back to work. But to have the basic protections of unemployment insurance is extremely important and should be continued.
Would you be open to another